It's 34 degrees in here. It was 32 when I first got in here, but I got my space heater. But we're coming at you, and I didn't even try to dress up, right? I'm just in my puffy North Face jacket, which remind me,
Luke,
brings us to today's sponsor, North Face. No, just kidding. We don't have a sponsor. Everyone should support great Republican Senator Roger Marshall's Credit Card Competition Act in order to stop the out-of-control, swipe-free ripoff. Roger is a fantastic senator, President DJT. That was sent out a couple of weeks ago. And what he's referring to is this bill that was introduced originally, I think, in 2023. This is the Credit Card Competition Act, and it never made it out of the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, I guess in the Senate. But Trump, in the middle of January, decided to bring this back to the forefront. As I imagine it was part of just a broader effort to introduce ways to improve the affordability issue. Yeah, the affordability issues, I think, taking the spaghetti, throwing it against the wall and all that. Joe, first off, just to get everyone situated, it's not totally obvious, but when you swipe your card, Joe, to go and buy that embarrassing medication or whatever it is that you got to get, what happens? Go ahead, Joe. Take it away. What happens?
Yeah, what does happen? Well, the credit card company pays at point of service. You have an account with the credit card company. They run up your tab on agreed upon payment dates. You pay it or you don't. If not, you get charged interest.
This isn't obvious. There are two things.
Yeah, but if we consider the ROI on the types of transactions,
I'm going to go ahead and I'll show you. This is my credit card. My finger over the important stuff here. But there are two things on this credit card, right? There's the issuing bank.
I got those last four numbers.
I covered up most of the good stuff, but that's Chase, right? That's the issuing bank. But everyone will recognize this one at the bottom. That's Visa. Sometimes you'll get that little yellow red Venn diagram thing. That's MasterCard. So what we're looking at is two separate things. The important thing here is the network. This is the Visa network. And when you go ahead and swipe a card, Visa has its network of thousands of banks, probably all 5,000 or so banks in the United States that they probably have individual relationships with at both kind of at a legal and also technological level. And what the network does, it goes and asks the issuing bank, so in this case Chase, a couple questions. Like one, hey, could this be fraud? Or is this guy within the credit limit? Is this card blocked or expired? Just a couple quick questions, and then in 2 to 10 seconds, the bank will shoot back the answer to that. And the answer is no across the board. Then Visa will note the transaction, so how much and date and time and a bunch of stuff. Yeah, right. So then I think at the end of the day, Visa will go ahead and it'll, across all these thousands and thousands of banks, it'll net out what the transactions are, and then the clearing and settling will happen a couple days later. And so then your bank will finally pay the vendor. It'll come from your bank, and then you'll get up in the credit card statement that you have from, again, in this case, Chase, right? If you look at it, the two leading companies are Visa and MasterCard. And I think it's 50% of the transactions in the US are Visa, 25% are MasterCard, and then the rest are some of the other providers, mostly dominated by American Express and Discover. I'll note that American Express and Discover are a little bit different in that they are both the issuing bank as well as the network as part of their business model. With that as a background, let me talk to you about this act. Now, it's called the Credit Card Competition Act. It's also called the Durbin-Marshall Credit Card Mandate. So I noted from my impression of Trump, he mentioned Marshall. That's one of the senators that introduced the act, and I think it is considered bipartisan. But let's look into the act and see exactly what this thing is supposed to do. My first comment I'm going to make here, it's quite short, but I think it's grossly over-lawyered. If I read this to you, I don't think it'll make much sense outside of people who are lawyers. And it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me the first 20 times I read it. But I'll just give you some of the language here, because that's what we do here on this podcast. Not later than 1 year after the date of enactment of the Credit Card Competition Act of 2023, the board, that's referring to the Federal Reserve Board, shall prescribe regulations providing that a covered card issuer, so those are banks, or payment card network shall not, directly or indirectly, yada, 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 shall not restrict the number of payment card networks on which an electronic credit transaction may be processed to one such network, two or more such networks, if AA, each such network is owned, controlled, or otherwise operated by capital AA, affiliated persons, or capital B, networks affiliated with such issuer, or double lowercase b, any such network is identified in yada. It goes on like this, but I think you'll get the point that like it's really hard to understand. But
It's
at
like
the
the
end
kind
of
of
the
sentence that
day,
needs to be drawn in a diagram instead of words.
yeah, 100%. It's really not clear. So let me just try to translate what it's trying to get at. Going back to my credit card, instead of having just like one symbol at the bottom here, you'll have two. You'll have two separate credit card networks. And it's up to the merchant would decide which network rails, sometimes they're called, which network that they want to use, and then ultimately which fees they're going to be charged. One of the biggest barriers to entry for other credit card companies is that massive network. In order for you to be competitive, you need to have your card accepted anywhere. Like, I'm not going to go ahead and try to get a credit card with somebody in which there are a bunch of places that won't accept it. It really has to be accepted everywhere.
Got to be in the club.
So again, it's just networking effects and all that. And then banks who are issuing these things don't want to partner with someone who doesn't have a huge network because it's just going to be a lousy product. So this is coming around and saying, no, you have to partner with someone. And that other someone can obviously undercut Visa or MasterCard their fees. So the credit card companies are saying, hey, look, we invested so much in these networks. They're extremely hard to build and maintain. And you're just going to pass some legislation and just undercut all that investment. Now, banks are probably upset because now they need kind of double the number of counterparties that are going to be needed. The overhead associated with that is going to be a headache. They also wrote a letter. So I can quote one of the things they said. The CCCA, so Credit Card Competition Act, will not increase competition in the credit card marketplace, but it will benefit corporate megastores at the expense of consumers, community financial institutions, and smaller neighborhood retail merchants. It does so by reducing the number of credit card issuers competing for consumers' businesses, removing a customer's choice of preferred card network, reducing competitive differences among card products, limiting popular credit card rewards programs, and making it more difficult for banks to prevent fraud and protect transaction data. Some of those seem a little flimsy to me. It's talking about protecting community financial institutions. This would only be applicable for banks over 100 billion, for instance. You can kind of judge for yourself. I think it's a little flimsy. Here's another thing that they wrote. The CCCA will also enable a large increase in fraudulent card activity. According to a study from Texas A&M University, enactment of the CCCA could, based on 2021 card activity, double the amount of fraud to 20 billion over the next decade. This would be particularly detrimental to small businesses. They're going to be against it. I don't think it's necessarily for the fraudulent card activity reasons. It's probably just overhead, but there you go.
You got to say
and
something.
The winners are going to be merchants, I'd say, because they potentially get some lower credit card fees. Smaller credit card companies are going to like this because they got a foot in the door. And then, maybe consumers. I mean, curious to know how the costs will eventually in some way or another get passed on the consumer. If before the Visa and MasterCard network fees, which really weren't the biggest fees, I think the biggest fees went to the banks anyway. So I'm kind of curious to see how much would be gained from that. But those fees are probably ultimately sent on to the consumer. But we're only talking about, I think some of these fees, they're like a fraction of a percent for network. So curious to see what the returns would be there.
Yeah.
But
what is that fraud angle?
Yeah, I guess you can imagine if there's another network out there that's smaller, and maybe that would open up more routes for stealing credit card numbers and making false payments and stuff.
I could actually kind of see that, I guess. Yeah, because they're so entrenched, they've got significant investment also in cybersecurity and all that stuff. So if you got a bunch of new entrants that just don't have the resources to spend on that. If on net the total amount of fraud goes up, then that cost is going to go somewhere.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see where the controls are. I mean, we see before that it sounded like just in my description earlier of what happens in a credit card transaction, it's up to the banks to determine if such and such a payment is fraud. So there's another question mark there as to, so what? You get this other credit card company to attach the network to it if the ultimate control is with the bank. I think also, just to zoom out a little bit, just the broader context of this is kind of interesting between the Genius Act. So that's the thing for stable coins, the 10% cap on credit cards, that fee proposal, and then also now this Competition Act. It just feels as though credit cards, and particularly Visa and MasterCard, are kind of getting at it from the legislative front at a bunch of angles. And I've said on this program before that I think credit card fees, the kind of fees that Walmart, for instance, pays every year, I think are nuts. We're talking billions of dollars just to the credit card fees, just the cost of doing business. And so for Trump to call it out of control swipe fee, a ripoff, I don't disagree with that. But when you look underneath the hood a little bit, most of those fees I think are going to the banks, not necessarily the credit cards. And I also think this just means, like, if I were Trump, I wouldn't really look to this as a huge solution to anything. I would kind of wait for what I think stable coins are going to come through and really, really put a dent into credit card companies. Because I just think it's a cheaper way to make a transaction. Less friction, money saved. I think that's what's going to wipe it out, not like some legislative Band-Aid or something. In terms of the bill status, I don't think it's made it to a vote yet. I think basically it's just been thrown out as a truth, but that brought some attention to it. But this is probably not going to go anywhere.